Thank you. And I think, wow, what a ride. That's a kind of extraordinary experience, a tour de force from director Yorgos Lanthimos, his incredible cast and the creative collaborators. And I think there are so many thoughts to unpick and debate. Our discussion this evening is going to be looking specifically from a fashion perspective as we talk about the stunning costumes in Poor Things, how they represent, amplify, enhance the lush, extravagantly surreal storytelling, unashamedly provocative too. So on that note, I'd like to introduce you to Judith Watt, the author, the dress historian, author of many books, a font of knowledge and feisty opinion, whose brilliant writing is an ongoing source of inspiration to me in my work. My name is Sarah Bailey. I'm a writer and editor, a fashion journalist and a cinephile. I've long been fascinated by the intersection of fashion and film, and I've started the Fashion Film Club to galvanise conversations and gatherings where we can celebrate and explore the rich seam of creativity unleashed by cinema, costume, culture and clothing. In the coming months, I will be inviting more fashion thinkers, critics and practitioners to join me to discuss iconic films that have inspired their work, as well as some contemporary releases that are particularly interesting to look through a fashion lens. And so, without further ado, let us start to unspool some of the fascinating fashion threads in Poor Things. Judith and I think, will be in conversation for around 20 minutes, which should leave time for questions and contributions from the floor. And really, we'd love to hear from as many of you as possible. I should say that Judith and I will be in the bar after the event so we can keep the conversation flowing about Victorian fashion, sexual politics, Oscar nominations and more. So Judith, welcome. And actually, before we start to get into the granular detail of the costumes, I wanted to ask you briefly about reading Poor Things, the 1992 novel from Alistair Gray, which Lanthimos and his screenwriter Tony McNamara adapted. I think there's some controversies that probably many of you will know about in terms of the relocation of the story from Glasgow to London that probably deserve their own Q&A session. But Judith, can you tell us how you responded to the novel when you read it for the first time? And what did you make of this radical piece of work?
Well, thank you, Sarah. I'm ashamed to say I hadn't heard of Alistair Gray, or indeed of his novel Poor Things. It is extraordinary. It is so clever and multi-layered and humane and angry. And he was a Scottish writer. There is controversy about this being filmed or based, centred around London and, London and Paris, because there is so much. Anthony Burgess said he was the best Scottish writer since Scott, of Alistair Gray. But what there is in it, which I'm going to be very quick about, is a great critique of traditional upper class establishment male thinking. It's a very, very radical book. So when we look at these characters that we saw on screen, we're seeing about 2 or 3% of them. And we're seeing a really shallow's the wrong word, a quick look, quick summary of these people. And it's worth bearing in mind, the other thing is that, and this obviously has been made by someone who isn't British, is that it's that Bella actually speaks in a broad, or slightly refined, but broad Mancunian accent. And it's a fantastic story about class. But it is also subtly wonderful because Alistair Gray was a great fan of the poet Percy Shelley, and indeed of the author of Frankenstein, Mary Shelley, whose maiden name was Godwin. And she was the daughter of the philosopher and social justice campaigner, to use contemporary expression, a brilliant man, William Godwin. So Godwin, Baxter, and in the film, named after William Godwin, obviously, and his second name is Bysshe, after Percy Bysshe Shelley. So it's really multi-layered, and it was Cathy Acker who suggested to Gray that he should write from a woman's perspective.
Yeah, that's a fascinating detail, isn't it? And
yes, it's Acker who did it, his great friend.
And I think, I couldn't recommend the book too highly. It's wonderful.
Brilliant. It's so, his ability to sit on the kind of cusp of, Scottish nationalism and that move, and Gothic fiction and feminism and drama and colour and playing with language. It's terrific. And sorry, I'm just going to be really quick. When we were thinking over, what are we going to talk about? And how do you talk about a film like this and the clothes? So, I thought, well, maybe I should think about it as because Gray was an artist, but does this feel like a good illustration of the novel? Does Bella feel like a good representation? Her clothes, the kind of the outlandish style, the natural style of her, and it is a very good illustration. That's a compliment to the film.
Gray is an incredibly visual writer, and his those of you who've read Poor Things will know that it's full of illustrations that he drew himself, and he's an artist in many other aspects of life, and you can still see his work in Glasgow today. I think the Guardian called him the Glaswegian Piranesi. So I think it's only fitting that Lanthimos should bring Poor Things to the screen with such bravura visual imagination. And of course, it's got a very fashion look to it, this film. So Lanthimos worked with production designers James Price and Shona Heath, and I think Shona Heath is a name that's very familiar to many of the fashion people in the audience today. And she and James Price worked with costume designer Holly Waddington to create this marvellous world. And before we get into Holly Waddington's designs, just a few words on Shona Heath as a creative.
Well, Shona Heath has really started work or making a name for herself through collaborations. I mean, that's what I want to say about this film. It's a brilliant collaborative work visually, and in terms of acting and production. It's fantastic. So Shona Heath collaborated with the photographer Tim Walker in creating literary set pieces, and I think that it's Shona Heath creating these models, so you'd have complete distortions in these images and these sugary colours. I mean, Ben, you know a lot more about this than I do, but these strange colours and these references again and again to people, to great fashion, not fashion, but art people or cultural forces like the Marchesa Casati in particular. And Shona Heath managed to create this topsy-turvy kind of visual. And I think the whole playing with scale in this and her work and Price as well it looks like a brilliant piece of fashion art direction, which is not to undermine it.
So without further ado, let's get into the brilliant costume work. The costume work of Holly Waddington, a Lancastrian costume designer, previously best known for her work working on The Young Victoria with, Lady Macbeth with Florence Pugh. Judith, how does her incredible succession of costumes help us with our understanding of Bella?
I think the question is Bella dressing herself? And the logical answer would be no, she isn't, because she's come back as a kind of adult baby and is relearning things. But there's a great deal of authenticity about the character in the the development and the procession and the way that the costumes add to the narrative. But what, which I think is really important. But for me, I mean, trying to look at it, the concept, people say it's Victorian. Well, it's actually, that undermines the actual depth, because what it really is looking at a particular period. It's set in the 1890s, but a particular period in dress history in Paris and also in Britain, which was about bohemianism and artistic dress and the creation of an alternative to fashion, to the unhygienic nature of fashion, which damaged women's bodies. And so that is what I think one sees in Bella. I'm sounding really dry here, but I think it's brilliant because you can see the references. One particular shot when she's on the boat and she's sitting like this and she's got the wonderful orangey, what's it called? Burnt, I can't remember. Anyway, but is it burnt sienna colour? That is straight from Albert Moore's Flaming June, straight. One begins to see vignettes and the art references that are going on there. But she's got great sophistication, but I don't think that the costumes are separate from not only Bella, but from the aesthetic of the entire film. And Bella, the character, wears those clothes. The clothes don't wear her. And I think in The Favourite, the clothes really wore the actresses, actually, and the characters. So she's been so clever about understanding about how clothes change from white and loose-fitting baby clothes and become more developed. But what's really more interesting is you get the sense that she's choosing her own clothes and that she's gone through somebody's wardrobe. Maybe God's provided the wardrobe, but the jupon, the bustle jupon, the little half floating panel at the back,
like a caterpillar.
Yeah, which is a kind of, she's updated it by making it based really on a puffer jacket, but that's a specific undergarment. She's really taking apart the layers of Bella's clothes, making her vulnerable and stronger. So that is an undergarment, and so when you're seeing the back views of women with the trains in the film, that was to enhance the buttocks and make the waist look smaller. So she's taking undergarments again and again, and we're really unused to the idea of structured clothes, and particularly the kind of carapace of clothing in those days, in terms of crinolines or and bustles and corsets, of course, which she doesn't wear, which is, it gives a great alternative nature and quality to Bella and this film. And it really does lean in, as I think the hideous expression is. It refers very much to Bohemia and Oscar Wilde and the aesthetic movement. And you can certainly see that in Mark Ruffalo's brilliant costumes, which are kind of so louche and kind of, a wannabe Wilde, from Chelsea, just, chasing skirt, I mean, absolutely hideous. It's the most brilliant piece of acting. I love
brilliant performance.
Sorry.
I'm sure many of us are going to have our favourite Bella look, but her sort of signature is her powder blue legomatin bolero jacket, the frilly blouse and the yellow tap pants. Why is that such a standout costume, and what is Waddington pulling on? What references is she making?
Well, first of all, we're looking at, we're meant to be looking at a girl dressing as a woman. And the reference for that blue, and I thought about it a lot, is the illustrations, the coloured illustrations that one sees of Alice in Wonderland, originally drawn by Tenniel. But that kind of powder blue thing, I think, is a reference. But there is also, there are also references to, I think that she has drawn on, which is really good research, to the collection at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And there's a book called High Style, a very good catalogue that came out about 5 or 6 years ago. And there are several looks, as it were, in this film that are based. And there's one spectacular powder blue jacket and skirt, which is satin, that satin that she's used that's really important. But the little bolero shape with the big padded sleeves, it could be a child's outfit. I mean, it's everybody loves those puff sleeves, don't they? Or when one reads the press, people, if they're going to talk about the costumes,
all about the sleeves.
It's all about the sleeves, but those sleeves have been, have done before, and and there are certainly, themes with McQueen when he's done that.
Yeah, those Legamerton sleeves, those gigot sleeves.
Yeah, which were all incidentally to do with, with the development of the new women's suffrage, because they were based on artistic dress. They were based on little puff sleeves worn by the pre-Raphaelite women, who, by the way, just shut me up in a minute, but I have to say this while I was... The other thing that Bella is she's a stunner. She's stunning. And when the pre-Raphaelite artists, which included Elizabeth Siddal, various other women artists, wanted to describe or talk about a kind of new breed of woman from the 1860s, with the growing ideas of women's suffrage and dress reform and women wearing trousers, for example, that they call these women stunners, the opposite of the shrinking, violent Dickensian heroine were called stunners, and she's a stunner. I mean, the idea of the powerful woman certainly bears reference to that.
Absolutely, very, very powerful woman. Should we just talk a second about the costume designer's decision to do away with corsets? So unusual in a period film, but then of course this isn't really a period film, is it?
No, it's not. It's not. It's about radical. It's about radical ideas, and those expressed literally. There is great authenticity in what she's done, because it harks back to what I was talking about there. But yes, mostly we'll see women in corsets and crinolines and tightly laced, and I think it's Emma Stone, I think, is such a good actress, but that kind of gamine little flat chest when she walks in, and I was thinking, what is wrong with that silhouette? And I thought, no corset. And suddenly you're looking at somebody who could have been, in Bieber in 1972. It's a beautiful, it's just, this has got a good costume designer's stamp on it.
But I think those Victorian historical references in the architecture and the set design are being subverted by the production designers, by Lanthimos and Waddington. I feel it's very deliberate, the choices that they're making.
Yes.
Should we talk about some of the fabric choices in the film? Because the whole film is very textured from the moment we see those opening credits. The quilting, there's seersucker, there's ruffles, there's very feminine padded upholstery. Bella's bedroom is also almost like a kind of fabulously upholstered padded cell. Why? What are they achieving with those textures?
They're making it look better. Because I knew you were going to ask the question. I was looking at what's the name of the one of Mrs. Skivey, the madame in the brothel.
Madame Swiney.
Swiney. Sorry,
Microphone.
Madam Swiney. Sorry, I'm used to
Judith,
shouting.
can you put your microphone slightly closer to your mouth?
Yes, sorry.
As Bella might say.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at what she was wearing, and certainly in terms of the fabric, it gives. Sorry to be really banal about it, but we're watching a film, and they really add to the drama of it, and the kind of, they look like worms, or blood. And they're sensational to look at. It's more interesting than when one's looking at maybe lots of satin. I think what is interesting is her choice of colours. I think the colours are really, really good that she has used, and I know that because we discussed it, she worked very closely with Shona Heath, but obviously very closely with Lanthimos, and that really adds to it. I mean, if you compare that with the black and white beginning, which of course the other thing is the reference to the Wizard of Oz, when suddenly we see, young Dorothy in the frock, but they're modern fabrics. I mean, you say where they came from. A lot of them are
from Henry Bertrand in
yes.
Kentish Town,
Yeah,
by the way. There's just a shout out to some of the people in the audience
absolutely.
who know all about it.
But they're upholstery fabrics, aren't they?
No, I think they're well. Are they?
Well, they look to have that weight, certainly. But yeah.
And one of the fabulous details, Madame Swiney, played by Catherine Hunter, the great Theatre de Complicité actress, amazing performance, I'm sure we all agree. That kind of dried blood-coloured housecoat she wears, that particular fabric, which was ordered from Kentish Town, but Waddington describes that texture as being like varicose veins. It's got that sort of spongy texture. And I think that whole visceral kind of like gross, disgusting kind of like world of the brothel is expressed through varicose vein jacquard.
Yes, but also surely if you're an actor, you want to feel the part, don't you? You want to do anything that will add to that, and so for her to be feeling this and this kind of scratchiness of it is obviously important.
Another texture I think we should talk about is Bella's raincoat that she's wearing when she and Wedderburn are ruined in Paris. Tell us about that raincoat.
Yes, apparently the raincoat, Waddington, or it's a cape actually, Waddington wanted to make it as similar as possible, or evoke the idea of a condom. And so I thought that's interesting, and certainly the dome shape it's just very funny. But so I thought, well, I'll look up 19th century condoms, because I know in the 18th century Boswell used sheep gut condom. That's what people would use from animal membranes. But yeah, the first condom, rubberized condom, was invented apparently in 1844, and indeed when you look online, thank you online, they are that yellow colour. So I mean, it's that attention to detail is not only interesting, it's also extremely funny.
Yeah, you'll never look at your cagoule in the same way again. So my favourite of Bella's outfits is her black frock coat with knee boots and socks that she wears when she's embarking on her new chapter as a scholar. To me, it could have walked the Louis Vuitton runway. I love that. Tell us about that frock coat, Judith, and why does it signify the new emancipated Bella?
Well, first of all, it's based on a masculine garment. It's not a woman's garment, it's a man's garment, it's suiting. It's a heavy, heavy wool. So that means she's moved into a different sphere. It's the fact that it's also extremely severe is interesting. But apparently it was meant to be longer, and Emma Stone wanted it to be short. But that is signifying a seriousness which we haven't seen before, but it's so neatly tailored and beautifully shaped. And in those, the women in the 1890s were, of course, wearing tailor-mades. This is when the idea of the jacket and skirt made from suiting was happening because women were beginning to go to work. It was really important. Women being employed in the office, and you'd wear suits that and the jacket was definitely based on a riding suit, a riding jacket, or a men's suit. But it crosses over into that. But it's a terribly modern garment. I think it's, that's what makes it so appealing, and the silhouette of it's so sharp and beautiful. And then, of course, worn with those brilliant socks. It's kind of weirdly serious. She suddenly moved into a different area, hasn't she? And of course, those little boots are brilliant. And I came across a picture of a performer called Finette from the 1880s and 1890s, who was a muse and model for James McNeill Whistler in that period. And there's a picture of her in boots. This is what people used to wear in the 70s and 60s, the Inello and David dancing boot. But there's a picture of her from the back view with her legs all contorted in boots that are identical, apart from the toe being there. And I thought, God, that is just seeing the kind of authenticity in so many ways of a film that a story is complete fantasy. And when you read the book, you don't know what the truth is at all until the end, till the last page. And he takes you through a maze, the cleverness of it.
So just touching on one of the other men's costumes in the movie, Godwin Baxter, God, as Bella calls him. I know when we went to look at some of the costumes at the Barbican, we were very taken with God's outfit, that kind of furry coat and his onesie. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, what's called the onesie, the all-in-one suit that he's wearing, I mean, I may be completely wrong, but I can say that in the 1880s with the dress reform movement, sorry to go bang on about this, but this is when the idea of a kind of conjoined top and bottom, trousers and shirt made purely in wool was advocated by Dr. Jaeger. So it goes back to that, but also Waddington has been really great with her research, and she looked at the later men's dress reform from from around the First World War with the artist Hayat, who was Italian, who worked a lot with Madeleine Vianney, did brilliant illustrations for the Gazette du Bon Temps. I mean, a very important decorative artist who wore all-in-one suits, and it was to do really with modernity, and awakening. But it looks like a jumpsuit. It is a jumpsuit, but it gives that idea, I suppose, because poor old God has no genitals in the film. I don't know what to say. I mean, it's fascinating.
Who knows what is contained within that union suit? And I think one last question before we bring in some of the voices from the floor. I mean, we've talked about Waddington drawing on elements of historical dress, kind of like referencing some of the kind of provocative beauty of McQueen and so on. But can you imagine this film and Bella's kind of outfits, her silhouette, going on to influence fashion designers in the future?
I'm sure that it will. I thought Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon would, which was so brilliant, but it didn't so much. Yes, of course it will. If it actually gets fashion designers to start doing some research outside the immediate field in front of them, that would be really, really good. I'm going to go back to McQueen. His Eclect Dissect collection, which I think was for Givenchy. I think it was autumn-winter 97. is based on a scientist. It's a scientist from the 1880s who's dissecting women and putting women's bodies and clothes together from different parts of the world. There are so many question marks over that, but I have to say it is one of his most extraordinary collections, and I'm quite sure that there will be lots and lots of copies in Zara and various other places. God, I'm probably going to be sued. Copies, yes, in Zara and online. And I just know that so many of my ex-students dress in her manner anyway, brilliantly. So, you know, it is that teenage child woman who is strong and outrageous and fierce and clever and can see a con artist from a million miles off, whatever gender, that is tapping into. And that is what is so modern about this and was so modern about Grey. And finally, the hand stitching, when you and I went to see it, you know, that idea of, oh, you know, it's costume, you know, you can't really see anything. Everything is perfect. You know, it's perfectly done. And so when those actors are wearing the clothes, they're thinking, this is fantastic.
Beautifully put. Thank you, Judith. And could I see any hands? Would anyone like to make a comment, have questions for the extraordinary Judith, who, as you can see, it spills over with knowledge and inspiration? Would anyone like to contribute? I can see a hand.
Sorry, I thought it was slightly incongruous that Bella so often appears in the sort of mini-skirted version of Victoria with Mary Quant and, you know, with a mini-skirt and short things, whereas everyone else is in full Victorian gowns. And can you explain or comment on any reasons for that or the effect that it's causing?
Mike. Sorry, I've thought about it, and you're absolutely right. I think there's a lot to do with her being a child in it, and the idea of play clothes and the legs and the body being liberated. However, it's also exposure of somebody, of an actress. I would say, and to reiterate, Waddington is a very good designer, and this is a film of the fantastic. You know, the more you look at it, you think, this is, you know, yes, I can talk about references, but the imagination here is so extraordinary. And the cleverest costume designers have their own imprint. And I think that by putting Bella into that mix and match, and particularly the little cami pants, the yellow cami pants, is brilliant. And it's also very strange in Lisbon, isn't it? When she just walks out like this, you know, and everybody else is wearing long skirts and etc. And in real life, there would have been an absolute uproar. But in this, we suspend our imagination. Yeah.
And I think another one of the sort of logics behind that is that prior to the Lisbon trip, she's been a child in God's house, and Mrs. Prim has probably dressed her. And she doesn't know how to dress herself, so she wanders out effectively in her underwear because the little yellow shorts are her little kind of underpants. But yeah, it's an interesting observation. So, Ben at the front. Oh, sorry.
To kind of add to that, I kind of thought that when she walked out into the public, you didn't think that everyone's jaws would drop, and it's about so much of this film for me seems to be about rejecting convention, and that you're actually, it's not about the people in the real world there, whatever that real world is. It's not their opinion, it's yours that kind of counts. So the fact that people don't bat an eyelid when she vomits in front of them, all of this kind of behaviour including the clothes, and they were even more bound by convention through clothing then.
Yes.
And I think it's for you to make your opinion about what should be conventional and what shouldn't be, rather than taking your lead from the general public. I think that illustrated it really well. That was not a question so much as that.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to follow on something I think you were saying, which was that, so obviously in Poor Things, the costumes were phenomenal and clearly very well researched, references to the women's suffrage movement and the onesie we were just talking about. And then you hinted that maybe the fashion industry today isn't as deeply well researched, maybe. Yeah. I just wonder why you think that is, because obviously there's such like an interesting history to a lot of clothing. And so it sounds like you're saying that basically it's now very shallow. And I'd love to explore that.
I do think there's a limit to the research. And I think there's a limit to information that is coming through to a lot of students or people wanting to design. And I think a lot of it is to do with what's online. And the quickest way to research for a lot of people, I've got my students here who will testify or maybe want to comment, ex-students, a lot of the research is done online and that's filtered. You know, that is so limited. What is in books and what is in archives and museums and in art galleries, you know, if you look at McQueen, art galleries, photography, visual culture, was incredibly important. He started off with a 1589 tailor's book that had been published in the 1970s. That, I think, is happening much less. The speed of fashion, contemporary fashion, fast fashion, means that to be able to really dwell and allow yourself time is extremely difficult. So it's becoming more and more repetitive and more, less and less interesting. And fashion is incredibly accessible. If we're looking at that period, it wasn't. I mean, people wore fashionable clothes, but, you know, high fashion was unbelievably exclusive. I mean, there's a little reference to Schiaparelli, I should say, in the film. And I often think about how she says the more outraged people become, the more, you know, somebody in Des Moines, Iowa is going to buy my clothes. It's great, you know. But there is far less evidence of research. And it's not about swatting, it's about releasing the imagination. And great designers and great creators, in my opinion, are capable of great imagination. We've just seen that with this film. And I'm not talking about the costumes here, I'm talking about the film. The whole package is people who really can see things and visualize and push themselves. So, yeah, it will definitely appear in the high street.
That's such a great answer, Judith. Thank you. I think we've got time for one more question. Oh, yeah.
Hi. Just out of curiosity, I noticed that she hardly wore any hats.
Yeah, she hardly wore any hats. You're absolutely right. The hair is an issue, isn't it? The hair is a major, wonderful part of the story. The fact that it grows an inch every other day, God, I'd kill for that. You know, the interesting thing about the hair, and I'm sure that it has great modernity to it. You know, I'm sitting looking at one of my friend, an ex-student there, who has long hair with centre parting there. Lots of, you know, it's very current. that hair is the most shocking. If we were going to talk about what's really shocking in contemporary terms, that's the hair. And Rossetti did a painting of his sister, Christina Rossetti, his sister who's a poet, as the Virgin Mary at the Annunciation. And it was shown at the Royal Academy, and there was an absolute outrage and uproar because her hair was not only loose, it was wet. So she had centre parting long hair. It looks completely lank. It looks unmanaged. And that hair story of Bella and how they've used that, I think is wonderful, because if we want, we want to talk about walking out in a mini dress when everyone is in gored skirts, and frou-frou petticoats, the hair is such a trademark, and it's so interesting what she does with it, isn't it? She does have one hat. She has the summer hat, and there's a picture of her in the novel of her in that hat.
And so I think that Seri would like to ask a question. I'm looking for Abla. If we could just take one last question. You don't?
I'll speak up.
Yeah.
I absolutely loved Bella's pale blue jacket and the little yellow shorts, and I thought that was so liberating. But I also felt that was when Bella was at her happiest. And I just wonder if what you thought of the significance of the very red satin dress towards the end when she's sort of reacquainted with her husband and feels very angry. Does the red of that and the drama and that dress just didn't feel like Bella?
No, it didn't feel like her at all, did it? I know that there are references and discussions that they were the team were very influenced by Bram Stoker's Dracula, and the costume designer, the late Aiko Ishioka, I think influenced that a lot. If you think of the red of the Bram Stoker, and the drama, the anger of that dress. I might be talking nonsense, but I know that in that first shot that we see of Victoria, in her previous life, that carapace of those sleeves, I think is a strong reference to that costume by Ishioka. But I completely agree with you. The other thing that's really interesting about that is that Doberman, sorry, I'm a dog nut, is totally wrong. He would not have had a bloody Doberman. He was a fascist, the character, but he wasn't German. He would have had some smelly bloodhounds, or a couple of Labradors. And I found that really style over substance, I have to say. Sorry.
Well, I think that was the last question that we could fit in. And as I'm sure you can imagine, when Judith and I were looking at the costumes at the Barbican and we were chatting about them, there were about 20 people kind of following us, hanging on her every word. So I would like to thank Judith for her incredible insights.
Thank you.
I'd also really like to thank the Garden Cinema for having us, and specifically
Thank you so much
to Abla Khalaf for this evening. If you would like to follow the Fashion Film Club, and I hope you do, to continue these conversations and receive news of future events, please do. At the moment, you'll find us on Instagram at Fashion Film Club FFC, or lowercase, and coming to other platforms soon. Thank you again for coming, and if we don't see you in the bar to toast the end of Dry January, I hope we get to toast again and to have another fantastic conversation. Thank you.